I'm kind
I'm
of
honest
a
too.
oriented person, but the
Not
beauty of
perfect.
it is knowing what I know, I've been able to make optimal choices, and that allows me to get away with a lot more. And
True.
I've said this very openly. One of the beauties of my program is it allows you to abuse yourself so much more efficiently. In fact, I'm gonna confess a little something here about my blood type
Please.
constitutional thing, which I'm a Pitta and a B, and I call that type the steady flame
Mm.
because B is pretty balanced.
Good morning and welcome to the Fusionary Health podcast. I'm Dr. Shivani Gupta, and this is the podcast dedicating to recalibrating your health every day. My goal is to help you wake up each day energized by addressing root causes and giving you new approaches to preventive health. The more we know about integrative health, the more empowered we are in building the vibrant health we want. Welcome to the Fusionary Health podcast. Today, I have an incredible guest in store for you. Susan Joyce Proctor is here, a fellow Ayurveda expert, a practitioner. She is so much more than that. So I'm excited for you to learn about Susan and what she does. Welcome, Susan.
Oh, thank you, Shivani. I'm so happy to see you. I know we were expressing we've been so busy with our individual paths that we haven't connected lately, and this is just such a wonderful excuse to do that and catch up on Ayurveda and girl stuff and business and all of that.
Absolutely. So, Susan, you reminded me that we met 7 years ago, and I will never forget. There was a restaurant called Harvest in East Boca, East Del Rey. We
Hmm.
sat there at a conscious co op meeting, I believe. And when we met, people were like, "Oh, you have to meet each other. You're both the Ayurveda girls." And as soon as we sat down, I was just so excited that someone else spoke my language because
Well,
rarely do people have a deep intuitive understanding of the doshas, Ayurveda, its intersection with astrology, the relevance of bringing your dosha into your life in a rhythm. And so we nerded out together, and I just felt like I'm understood by someone. And it's just so nice because I am American, I'm Indian as well, but I look at Ayurveda from this modern viewpoint of how are we going to utilize it. And whenever I go to India, it's always so classically taught, it's classically applied, which is fine. I get it. That's the original way. But to
mhm.
meet someone who understands that we need to take the science and transform it and evolve it and work with it, to me is just so incredible. So I've always loved having you in my life. So
Oh,
welcome.
thank you. And I feel the same for, the parallel reasons, because as you know, and we'll just share with the audience, I'm not from India in this lifetime. I know I've worked with this before because there's no explanation for the understanding that I feel that I have. But I come from a Jewish family from Brooklyn, New York. There was nothing in my life in this lifetime that prepared me for this. And I've had almost no one to talk to about these things for that reason. And you and I, we not only spoke Ayurveda, but we spoke a businesswoman's perspective on what are we here in the world to do and bring. And I have a very clear picture that shortly after that luncheon, we met for tea and we were sitting on that second floor and we
Trenti,
were,
Boca.
yes, exactly. And we were brainstorming a vision for a women's wellness revolution
Yeah,
in the
true.
world. And we felt one of the other things that was really cool about our association is we're completely different generations. I'm exactly the same age as your mom.
Right. Yes, true.
So we were actually representing the Pitta and Vata stages of life and, different backgrounds and experiences. And even though we've been on parallel tracks since then, I've always felt we were going to come together again. And I've been really looking forward to this. And we were speaking just a little earlier that all of a sudden Ayurveda seems to be exploding around us. That next week on my birthday is World Ayurveda Day. And we have an event here in Florida. And I've been invited suddenly all around the world to be speaking about this. So Yeah, it's time, isn't it?
It is. It's time, and more people are hearing about Ayurveda. Sometimes I wonder, because I was sharing with you, I've been interviewed on 150
Mm.
podcasts in the last year or two, and I've been saying it, and people are learning about it. And sometimes I wonder if the word is hard, and because pronouncing the word is hard, it's not gaining traction. And then I was like, that can't be it. But it's just Ayurveda. It's not. I know it doesn't roll off the tongue easily. And I know today we're going to get to dive into doshas and blood type. So for everyone listening, we're going to talk about how your specific blood type correlates to doshas. And Susan and I have so many dosha related topics we could dive into. I feel like we're going to need multiple episodes to
So
have.
we're going to be geeking about it.
It is, but for anyone who loves self insight, I think it's the most powerful tool. Any of us women, could be men listening, but any of us who are on this journey of trying to understand ourselves, who are into personal development, over 13 years ago, I went to a Tony Robbins conference. I've been to so many personal development conferences after that, so many different spiritual retreats. Then, of course, I know my human design. I'm a projector. Of course, I know my Enneagram. I'm a 3. I know you have different other diagnostic tools you use to self-understand. And so when we get these understandings, I know my astrology really well. When you understand these things, you just have a deeper level of self-awareness. And I find that deeper level of self-awareness really helps at different intersection moments of your life. I have a pretty amazing life and I'm part of really big families. So at any given time, like I'm in a moment of my life called family needs me most. I'm the eldest sister-in-law, so I control a lot of things in a moving part system, this machine called the Gupta empire and family. And so my job is to hold kapha energy and space for that. But I'm naturally a pitta, so I have to take my pitta aside and say, sorry, you can't be your fiery, productive self. Go sit, hold space, support, be love, slow down. And then that's hard because if you go into a space that's not your normal dosha for too long, you get kind of quagmired a bit into it. And then you start to wonder, oh, why am I not my normal self? So I would love for you to share what led you to Ayurveda. And then we're going to get into blood type with dosha.
Awesome. Okay. I'm going to try to be succinct. I'm from New York, and I was living in New York City for over 30 years. I had a corporate career, you may recall. I was a vice president of a bank, very different life. And I literally discovered yoga in 1987 and had to wake up and left that life. And in 1992, I was in one of my periods that I had never been able to name before, of when I would get to a place of being really stressed out and kind of hyper and couldn't sleep and I'd lose my appetite. And I was still neurotic enough to think that not eating was a good thing because, like most Western women, my weight used to be an issue. And so I would be in this spiral that I didn't know how to break, of being really ungrounded. And uh, there was a beautiful day in May, that I was so spaced out that I literally forgot to get off the subway. I was going somewhere, and I'm a pretty intelligent person. I used to get so fuzzy that I couldn't think straight, that I literally had to sit on a park bench, and I considered going home and starting over. Realized I could walk to where I was going. Okay, I'm getting there. And I passed this is a true story, and I know it sounds crazy, but I passed a metaphysical bookstore. Something
Nice.
drew me into the store. You've heard this before. And literally a book about Ayurveda fell on my head. So when people ask which Ayurveda, it was Ayurveda came to me, and there was on the back a little description of Vata, Pitta, Kapha. And I read the Vata and I was like, oh my God, how did they know this about me? I've never seen any way of describing this experience. So of course I bought the book and read it overnight. And then because it was in alignment, I think, with my soul purpose, I heard about a course that was taking place in Ayurveda on Long Island, and I was going to be there that day. And one thing led to another. So I did a certification program back in 1992 before I knew anybody that had ever heard of Ayurveda.
Yeah.
And it was kind of basic compared to some of the training I think is available today. But I did another year-long program a few years later. And as you know, I always felt like I had a deep understanding of this. And it probably goes beyond the time we have today. But that was how I came to it. And just to continue on this a little bit, I was very Vata deranged. People laugh at that expression, and it really helped me break
True
that
though.
cycle, because not eating and not sleeping lead to more not eating and not sleeping. And as you know, we have all these amazing tools and sesame oil and knowing how to eat properly, that as I reminded you earlier, I fortunately cannot claim that Ayurveda saved my life, because fortunately my life was not in danger. But I believe it really did rescue my quality of life and my ability to be productive, because if I was still in that Vata state, there's no way I could have accomplished the things that I have in the last 30 some years, or be having this conversation with you.
True. I get that completely. And for those who might be wondering what we're talking about, previous to this, just in the last 2, 3 episodes on my podcast, I did a whole episode on doshas, which is why Susan was like, okay, let's take doshas, but go in a
We got to
different.
take this further. And you
Yeah.
described a client, I think Priyanka was her name, that it was exactly my experience.
Yeah, exactly. And so when it comes to these doshas, vata, pitta, and kapha, when it comes to these, it's so important to understand what is your primary dosha, your prakriti, what are you from birth, and then where are you now? Where are these big imbalances? Because what you're saying is you are identifying as a vata and you aren't even naturally a vata, but you were just so imbalanced. And we all go through lifetimes where in different periods we are so imbalanced in our dosha, and vata is a tough one when you get imbalanced. I mean, kapha is too, and pitta can be because I'm so pitta. But when you get so imbalanced in a dosha, you end up in a cycle, and it takes work to break the cycle and come out of it. And it can feel tough, but it's of course so worth it, because then we get to optimize back into our original,
And then we
most
feel like
unique self.
ourselves. But
Exactly.
to your point, regardless of what our dosha, primary constitution, is, as you know, vata is the dosha that throws the other ones off. So regardless of, what our balance state is, that's the one that seems to be the most challenging. And, that didn't, that helped me understand something, because
Mhm.
when I lived in New York, we had, more of change of seasons than we do here in Florida. And October was my tough vata month,
True.
because as we know, and we can just mention for our audience, the doshas cycle through the seasons. There are 3 seasons, and the autumn is vata. And I remember having times before I got myself balanced in October of being so unbelievably hungry that I remember once I had 5 meals that day, 5 actual meals, and was still walking around the Upper West Side of Manhattan trying to think of what I could eat, because my acne was just out of control. And now I realize that when a pitta person is that vata imbalanced, it just fans that digestive fire. Like knowing what I know now, I would have realized I couldn't have been a vata, because a vata would never get as hungry as I got.
Correct.
Doesn't that make sense now?
It makes so much sense. It makes so much sense. I forget that aspect. I always teach it, but it's always so funny when you don't always fully apply it to yourself. But come fall, I'm all of a sudden hungrier than ever. And I'm always like, stop that. Get on the track. It's called a workout. It's called yoga. What's your problem? So I have to bring so much more discipline into the month of October. And I always attribute it to like putting the brakes on summer and transitioning. But you're right, it is that fanning of the fire. Autumn winds, vata season, fans on the pitta fire flames. And that pitta fire, our digestive fire, it just turns up a couple notches. And so our job is, how are you then going to support it? Is it healthier fats? Is it really grounding, nourishing meals? Like support it, go through it instead of battling against it.
Exactly. And knowing what we know, Shivani, probably the solution is not whether to eat more or not eat more. It's to be aware that we want to be balancing vata with our food at this time of year.
Exactly.
And salads aren't going to do it. We want soups, and we want curries, and we want the things that in Australia, they say it touches the sides, the comfort food that grounds us. And you know me, I live by sesame oil. I I was trying to calculate how much sesame oil I have put on my skin in the last 30 years, and I cannot even imagine how
A
much I've
tank.
absorbed. To
Like those
me, that's
tanks
the
that
ultimate.
store oil.
And actually, if we want to start meandering into our conversation about the blood types,
Yes, let's do it.
what I can say that would be, I think, a good segue is you and I have a very similar. We have a similar primary constitution. Actually, the same. We're both Pitta.
Yep.
I would say, a secondary Vata, and you probably have a secondary Kapha. And I'm going to suggest that that secondary dosha is influenced by our blood types that are slightly different.
Okay.
So if I can just claim the stage for a couple of minutes with a little bit of background.
Please, because people do ask me, what do you think of blood type? Do you think it's valid? I'm like, well, I have this one practitioner friend and she believes in it and I've heard her speak on it. So I definitely believe there's something there. Although I don't follow the rules of it myself because I'm a vegetarian.
Most don't either. So I want to offer an easy approach to this.
Perfect.
So it's my easy approach, because as much as I love Ayurveda and don't need to convince you or the audience about that, it's only one system of truth. And I picture human beings being like a crystal with many facets. And no one of those facets is going to describe all of us.
Sure. True.
So Ayurveda to me is a profound description, but it's not the only one. And one of the things I love, we were talking about Dr. Vasant Lad, who is one of my mentors and heroes, and I think the foremost actual Ayurvedic physician in the United States.
True.
He describes Ayurveda as the descent of consciousness into matter. So we understand it as a spiritual science, and that this amazing body we have is just the physical manifestation of our being. And when we understand it that way, we can treat it, I think, in a way that's much more meaningful. And with all of that amazing stuff, to me, it's just one perspective.
Sure.
When we talk about blood types, and you use the word believe in, to me, that's a little interesting because Ayurveda is very grounded in quantum science, as you know.
True.
And I now have a way of explaining that. 32 years ago, that was not part of the Western mindset. And
True.
so to say, well, the rishis received this wisdom in meditation wasn't that compelling to most people in this culture. But now that we understand quantum science and energy and vibration, Ayurveda is unbelievably sophisticated in quantum science. But in regular Newtonian science, the blood type science doesn't really require a lot of belief.
Right.
It's science in the lab kind of science.
True.
And again, I can be a little easy here and remind all of us that we all know about blood transfusions and blood typing. If you get the wrong blood, you could die because blood is incompatible. The antigens are like that. And actually, it kind of means that the 4 different blood types are almost a different species. And in the same way that the different constitutional types have a different digestive system and different immune profile, the blood types do as well. And what I observed years ago, and I know you and I spent a lot of time looking at this, I looked at it and I saw, well, there's 3 doshas and 4 constitutional types. And so I actually identified a system. I call it the hemodoshic system for obvious reasons, where there are 12 types in my system. And what I observed, and I remember sharing this with you, the qualities of each dosha and each constitutional type can either overlap and reinforce each other, or they can mitigate and balance each other, and almost anything in between. But to me, it provided a much more precise understanding of our strengths and weaknesses and the lifestyle and nutrition choices that would be optimal for us. So taking that into an example here of you and me, And I did a little research, and I found that Dr. Led actually agreed with me, which was awfully reassuring. I'm gonna read you a couple of statistics here.
That's awesome.
He said that the correlation between Vata and blood type A is 80%. And I'm not sure if that means that 80% of Vatas are A or 80% of A's are Vata, but Vatas and A's both have weaker digestion, lower immunity, and higher stress. So when you get that from both sides, you're dealing with somebody that I describe as somewhat delicate, and my archetype name for that type is the orchid. And I remember I had a student, because I had the great honor of teaching a course in Ayurveda at Everglades University, part of their alternative medicine program, and sharing this with future, practitioners. And she was an orchid, and she was contemplating her next training, whether to go to naturopathic medical school or acupuncture school.
Hmm.
And I said to her, I'll be really honest with you. I don't know if you have the stamina to go to medical school. Consider that. But if you do, I'm going to invite you to specialize in treating people like you when you become a doctor, so that you
Sure.
have an awareness of what it's like to have a delicate constitution, because you have different needs from somebody else. I did later find she became an acupuncturist. And
Yeah.
to me, that was instructive. At the other end of the scale, somebody who's a kapha constitution, who's stronger and has, stronger tissues and stuff, and a slower metabolism, if they have an O blood type, they have the very slow metabolism, but excellent immunity and health. And I can say to those people, because I call them oak trees, I said, if you avoid wheat and dairy and go to the gym, you will have excellent health. That's your little mini prescription. Whereas for the orchid, I would say, if you meditate and, eat right and have a very, a lifestyle that accommodates you, you can be optimally well. For me, well, no, let's do you. You're a Pitta and an O. Both of those types, and Dr. Ladd will say that there's a 65 to 70% overlap of those. You know that on both sides, you have very strong digestion.
Yeah.
Because O is the highest digestion on the blood types, and Pitta on the constitution. And intensity on both sides, which I don't have to remind you about.
Yeah.
So my archetype name for your type is the leader, and there's no getting around it.
Yeah.
There's no way you could avoid being a leader in this lifetime.
It's good to know. It's funny as you say that, because I think intensity is such a good word to use. It's such a positive, because Pitta energy can get intensely great or intensely intense in not a good way.
Indeed.
So you have to really learn how to manage it. But that's so fascinating. Those percentages are pretty high.
And I got this from Dr. Ladd. I never came across this before. With Pitta in particular, an RH negative is even more Pitta than an RH positive. So this is fascinating. And he also says, by contrast, because I'm a B blood type, so that's why I'm saying, although we have the same Pitta, I'm a Pitta Vata B is different from a Pitta Kappa O.
Correct.
And the overlap for me is I'm probably not quite as intense, because B is somewhat more balanced than O. But you asked me earlier about the other correlations of the blood types, and I was saying that honestly, I haven't seen that. Dr. Ladd says that the correlation between Kappa and B is 80%, and that between AB and Vata Kappa is 65%. I'm going to say that because B and AB are such a small percentage of the population, B is only 10% and AB is only 5%, I haven't seen enough of a sample for that personally in my practice and in my world.
Sure.
But it makes some sense, because, we could get very technical, but I did want to share this because we've never spoken about this before, you and me.
Sure. And a lot of people, it's interesting, don't know their blood type. I know my blood type because I used to donate blood a lot. I just can't on the years I travel to India. So it's like every other year I could. And so it was on my blood donor card. That's how I knew it, because a lot of people don't know it. But I think everyone should know their blood type, and they should look up the blood type diet. They should look up what it means. And it's so beautiful that you're correlating it right into your dosha, because it just adds another layer of depth into your understanding. So for example, I already know I'm a pitta. I already know I'm really intense, but I sometimes I won't want to accept how intense I am. So I won't manage to the level I should. And then I'll have certain days where I'm like, why were you crazy? Could you please settle down? Yesterday was one of those days where it was like, when the day stacks up too hard, it's like a pressure cooker. I can't take it anymore. So yesterday I had to walk in nature for an hour and breathe into the trees and cool down my fire. And
Yes.
it's still with my kids and their pitta cells, we can just all explode on each other. And it's like, that's not the quality of life I would like. I'd like us to be loving, kind, sweet
Well, I have something
people.
to say. I have two things to say to that. One, I'm
Yeah.
going to share an experience last week, and my computer died, and I was misled. So I kept buying parts and taking it back, and it wasn't right. And I was getting more and more pitta. And I was on a Zoom with my team, and somebody said to me, "Well, I'll stay on when we're done here, and I'll try to help you with such and such." And I said to her, and I was able to say it nicely, "I appreciate the offer. My nervous system is short circuiting right now. I cannot think another thought. I cannot say another sentence. I am grateful for your offer, and I don't want to bark at you. I'd like to call you back when I can speak like a human."
That is the exact nice way to say how I feel. A lot of the time, my nervous system is short circuiting, almost like I'm a robot with sparks flying off. Everyone should run, and I need to go put myself into a new charger far away from humans.
And it's a compassionate act to the people around us, because I know myself. I mean, we're both lovely people, but I have very sharp edges, and I have to manage that. But I want to share a little insight, and this is a tangent that I'm just going to mention because we could keep going there. But I'd like to tell you what I personally have discovered as my best tip under circumstances like that. And we kind of have talked about this a number of years ago. And again, I'm geeking out a little bit about, being this chick from Brooklyn, but these things are very meaningful to me. And I have been on this as a spiritual path for a long time. In addition to the doshas that we enjoy working with so much, there are the gunas.
Yes. Please explain the gunas. I've never covered gunas on this podcast ever to this audience.
All right. So again, I say this humbly.
Go ahead.
We're now in a realm of spirit here. The gunas are qualities, but they're like the primordial qualities of the universe. And I'm going to ask everybody to picture a triangle like this, where on the one side is too much, on the other side is not enough, and in the middle is just right, like a Goldilocks. So the three gunas are called Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas, just for us Sanskrit geeks. But Rajas is the quality of overstimulation. Tamas is kind of understimulation and decay. And Sattva is balance and purity. And the reason I picture that in a triangle like this is, here in the West, at least, I think we ricochet back and forth between Rajas and Tamas all the time.
Yes.
We wake up with coffee, and I do. I'm not judging it. I'm just observing. People come home in the evening and they have a glass of wine. And we're back and forth between over and understimulating ourselves to try to get to balance, and we never do. I'm overgeneralizing, but you get the point. When we can actually find that balance point in the middle, I believe we can ascend to sattva, to this state of purity and clarity. And this is the way I like to describe the gunas, Shivani, and you're welcome if this resonates with you. I compare them to beverages.
Yep.
Rajas is coffee, tamas is scotch, and sattva is herbal tea.
Mm.
And for years in my earlier training, we were trying to correlate the doshas to the gunas. And I finally realized, and again, found some additional truth with Dr. Frawley. Each of the doshas has a sattvic, rajasic, and tamasic expression. So with that said, to me, what the goal is all the time is to be aspiring to the sattvic expression of each of those doshas, because the sattvic expression of pitta is clarity and insight and, focus and all of that. It's the rajasic part that's the intensity that we struggle with.
Right.
And to me, that understanding provides a way forward. Does that make sense? Of course it does.
I just love you. Like, I just wish
to be able to say this to you.
Every week on a Friday, I wish I could take like a whole day and just enjoy you as a person, because you take all my thoughts and you actually have such a beautiful way of expressing them. And then when you say them, I get insights. Where normally, because I'm the practitioner and the teacher, I have to teach it. I'm trying to convey it to someone. I'm usually trying to find leverage to get them to understand and apply what I'm teaching. So I really look at it as leverage. When I'm in a consultation, I'm trying to figure out with this person, where's the button where I'm going to get them to commit to doing what I'm going to say. And if they're not, that's fine. That's their journey. But I'm so goal oriented. I want to get there. But I'm so intense about like, we have to win at our health, as if there's a winning endpoint journey goal, which I struggle with, because I'm always like, I want to win at my health. And I'm like, it's a journey, right? But you know what I just understood from what you said? I teach sattvic. Of course, in every dosha, we should achieve the sattvic feeling. I have had a nanny who helps support pickup of my kids for a year now, because my father-in-law was doing it and then he's not able to because he's not here. And so it's like, okay, I had a nanny for a year, and then this school year, I just felt like, you know what? From a budget standpoint, from a timing standpoint, I just don't want someone driving my kids, and they don't have much going on. I'll take the job. It's fine. And I've enjoyed it because I get more time with my kids on the road and I'm controlling all the moving pieces, and they come home with their nervous systems much better because they're with me. But do you know what I sacrificed? I sacrificed an hour in my house in peace after work where I used to wait for them. And I would get tea and get in bed and be alone. And that reset button was actually crucial to my personal happiness and peace. And I have not been able to understand for 2-3 months why I'm so crazy. And that would be it. I sacrificed something that I should not have sacrificed, because what's interesting is the other day I went the wrong way down the freeway to pick them up. And I was like, what is wrong with you? Like, you're a smart person. How can you take 95 south instead of 95 north? And I thought, this is vata derangement. I'm not used to going work till 4, run out the door, caffeinate again, which is not the right time for me to caffeinate, hit the road at 200 miles an hour, pick those kids up. And if I have not set my nervous system,
you've sacrificed your sattva reset, it sounds like.
Exactly. And so this is the conversation you and I have always had, is if everyone understood that the rhythm you build in your life for your dosha and your sattvic ability to have peace and nourishment and wholeness, if you build your life for that rhythm, you can have such an optimal life. But sometimes we make these sacrifices and changes, and we don't realize the level of what we're sacrificing.
And it's going to be different for each of us, which I think is the other reason having this insight is so valuable, because I'm very honest. I don't misrepresent myself, and I don't want to convey the impression that I live all of this all the time, because I really don't. I'm kind of
honest too.
A person, but the beauty of it is knowing what I know. I've been able to make optimal choices, and that allows me to get away with a lot more. And I've said this very openly. One of the beauties of my program is it allows you to abuse yourself so much more efficiently. In fact, I'm gonna confess a little something here about my blood type constitutional thing, which I'm a Pitta and a B, and I call that type the steady flame, because B is pretty balanced. And so my fire is not as challenged as yours,
That's
constitution.
really nice.
Okay. And I also have a different nutritional profile because my blood type does very well with dairy and yours not so much. In fact,
True.
I was listening, if I may, to your podcast and you were describing your post-pregnancy kappa thing. And you
Yeah.
were saying you were, chips and cheese. That was your blood type speaking up because O doesn't do well with grains or dairy. And okay, you know that. So I don't have that particular challenge.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I enjoy about this life, and I'm not recommending it to anybody else, it's just a personal confession. I do really well with ice cream because my blood type does well with dairy and my
Yeah.
fire can handle it. And it's one of my favorite things in the world that I do indulge myself in, and I can get away with it, quote unquote, because I know all the other things that would set me off that aren't worth it to me to do.
It's such a beautiful thing to.
I have to be perfect to benefit from all of this. I'm
We don't have
so
to be
imperfect that I feel like I need to be open about that.
totally. And I think in this day and age, as women, we put so much pressure on ourselves to be perfect and awesome and strong and leaders and incredible. I know I put a tremendous amount of pressure on myself and a great mother, and we're entering the holiday season. Like the list can always pile up. But I find if I'm not taking care of my nervous system and I'm not managing that fire, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what I want. The quality of my life will change so significantly that it won't matter. And one thing we were talking about earlier is astrology. And as an Indian, we love astrology. Indians are huge believers in astrology. When a child is born, we have something called a Janampatri. That's a document that's made by an astrologer. And I have read my Janampatri. You're not supposed to as a child. But that book predicted my life. It said she will go into business most likely. She will have digestive issues through her life. Like it was very specific. And when I read it, I was like, that's baloney. That's not going to happen. And now as an adult, I'm like, and we go to astrology regularly to ask questions like, what season are we in? What does the next few years look like? Looking back, I remember going to an astrologer and he was like, yeah, we already knew that 2020, we're in 2024. So 2004, your dad will pass away on this date. They knew. So will you share a little bit about the intersection of Ayurveda and astrology? Because that is not my area of expertise, but I'm always so fascinated.
Okay. Again, to be succinct, in my study of Ayurveda, I was told, as you were, that in ancient India, during the Vedic period of this unbelievable wisdom and advanced culture, that Ayurvedic doctors and Vedic astrologers worked very closely together because, and I need to explain that here in the West, when we hear the word astrology, most people are picturing that stupid little thing in the newspaper that, if you were born in this particular month, this is what's going on for you today. And that's kind of a silly generalization. So two things here. One is that Vedic astrology is based on an entirely different zodiac from Western astrology, and it is astronomically correct in a way that Western is not. So if we believe in the principle of as above, so below, we can absolutely use this as a very precise tool. And again, I'm preaching to the choir to you. I'm just trying to translate this to our culture. Okay,
Absolutely.
So with that as an understanding, consider that this can track because the planets represent larger patterns that we are part of in the universe, in the quantum universe. So with that said, a chart in Vedic astrology is not based on the month you were born. Like my birthday's next week, so I'm a Scorpio, quote unquote. It's based on your very exact birth time, which, in India, as you say, they know how important that is. I had to have mine rectified because on my birth certificate, it was wrong because in the West, we don't pay attention to this stuff. And he actually tracked it based on a parent's surgery, that the stuff, it's fixed. So with that in mind, what Dr. Frawley says about our astrology is it shows the vibrational and energetic tendencies that our soul signed up for at the moment of birth. But because we have all this Vedic wisdom, it gives us tools to understand and overcome our karma. And here's an example, and this would probably be relevant to you. The astrologer that did that rectification for me back in 1998 told me at the time that I should be wearing a ruby set in gold on this hand. And the vibrations, because of my solar planetary type, which is related to my pitta, actually strengthens my energy.
Interesting.
So there's so many things. I mentioned to you earlier that yes, there are the 3 basic doshas and constitutional types, but based on our chart, there are 3 types of vata, 3 types of pitta, and 3 types of kapha. I'm not just a pitta. I am a solar pitta, not a Mars pitta or a Ketu pitta, which I suspect you are as well. And that bestows some level of good health and fortune on us. And once we understand that, we can actually see how to strengthen our tendencies that are positive and to balance some of the ones that aren't, and to have a better understanding of the Vikriti, because this is mind-blowing, and I don't expect that I'm going to be able to master this in this lifetime completely, but you literally can see the cause of every disease in a person's astrological chart, the Vedic chart. You can see whether it's hereditary or nutritional or planetary or any of those things. And because these are subtle energies, we have tools of mantra and gems. And I work with frequency technologies that we have modern things to help balance this stuff. I mean, I feel like I'm living in a world that is like a little bubble that's so different from our larger collective, where we have incredibly sophisticated tools, both ancient and modern. So as I'm working with the astrology now, and I'm pursuing a course in Ayurvedic astrology very specifically.
Nice.
I'm able to do charts where I can identify not just pitta, but which pitta.
Nice.
And sometimes our ascendant, which identifies our dharma, is not always the same as our physical constitution. So this is so vast that I honestly wish I could devote the rest of my life to studying it. And I do not have the time for that because I have all of these other things. But the piece of it that I needed to discover for myself was the Ayurvedic astrology. And it is a whole science in itself of using our chart to refine our understanding of our Prakriti as well as the Vikriti in a way that my Ayurveda training alone was not as precise.
Sure, because there's only so much time. Like I did my master's in Ayurvedic sciences, and we did not dive into astrological relation to. No, it wasn't part of it, because it would be you took that area of study, and now it's like you can't correlate to PhD, but like you can have a law degree and then you can have an LLM. You can have a doctorate with your residency, but then you take the fellowship and refine further. So that's like a fellowship in a specific area of Ayurveda. And I love that, because sometimes people come along, like I'll meet certain clients and I'm like, I can't see it. Sometimes I can't see where it's coming from with them. It's like, it's a little cloudy. And you're looking at them like, I feel like I need your birth time. And in the West, we don't think of it like, let me ask the birth time. But as an Indian, you would not marry someone without knowing their birth time and location, because that chart has to be read. Either they're a match or they're not a good match. And that's something that we live by. So with clients, sometimes I want to ask them just so I can pull like a basic chart and understand what's happening. But you said something that was really profound. You said you can impact your karma through knowing your chart. And I thought, oh, that's so cool. I'm sure.
With quoting Dr. David Frawley, who is a global Vedic scholar, I didn't say that. He said that. And I just read that within the last few months, and it blew my mind. But think about it. I mean, you have much more experience with the astrology than me, and you read your book, so you know how deep this goes. I came to this later in life, and I'm exploring it with a particular focus. But Shivani, I've been working with Ayurveda for 32 years in this lifetime. And this just took everything. Me understanding my own chart, I actually saw my downfall, because there's also the houses that can identify health issues or other things. My, in fact, I'll tell you what it is. It'll make sense.
Hmm.
My Mars and my Mercury are both in my second house. Mercury is about communication. Mars is a warlike, aggressive planet. They're both in my house of communication and livelihood. So I have wonderful communication skills, but I've also been undone by them to a certain degree. And that's where I think coming back to the Gunas has been, that's what I am recommending to myself,
Sure.
because I am lucky enough to have all these tools. Like, how amazing is this?
It's true. And that's what I love the most about Ayurveda is it's a profound toolkit, as you mentioned. And I have such a love of Ayurveda. I immerse my whole life into it. So when you're like, it's only one facet, my whole being was like, yeah, but it's the best one. And I'm like, well, no.
But it is.
You're
And
integrative, Shivani. All the facets are incredible. I have such a reverence for functional medicine, naturopathic medicine, homeopathic, acupuncture, Chinese medicine. They're all beautiful. But within Ayurveda, given that everyone has incredible toolkits, within Ayurveda, I think we have such profound, deep tools of self-understanding and self-knowledge. In this episode, you and I got to throw around words like Prakriti and Vakruti. My poor audience is probably like, where did Shivani just go? Like, she's gone so deep in Ayurveda.
this chick from Brooklyn that's talking this funny language here.
Prakriti, just to remind everyone, is your dosha at birth. Vakruti is the imbalanced dosha world you're living in now, because we can tend to go off the path. I oftentimes share the story of when I had kids, I became so kapha imbalanced and I felt like I was not myself. And it took me a long time to bring myself back to my pitta self and just aligning to your original constitution, who your body actually is at birth is your Prakriti. And our goal is to get there. And so
I just want to make sure I agree with you that of
Yeah.
all the systems, this is the most profound. Because to me, that the descent of consciousness into matter, this to me is our soul's first choice, and then we pick the other stuff. But I'm with you.
Yeah, no, I'm glad. I'm glad. I mean, we've always been so resonant with each other. I mean, from the time we met, every time we do get to meet, we went for one walk post pandemic and caught up. And it was like we hadn't been apart even for a moment. We're always on that same page.
Remember that amazing program we did? We did a cleanse with a bunch of women. That was awesome. In fact, I'm wondering, you said something about wanting to get together for tea every week. And I realized that that's not realistic, but but you gave me an idea, because these days I assume we follow the energy.
Yeah.
I'm betting that there's a bunch of ladies that would be very happy to have tea with us.
Sure.
And be part of this conversation. So I'd be willing to think about doing that every month or two.
I
And
do too.
getting together.
Yeah, I think that would be so nice. I think we all need it.
We need it, and I don't know if we don't have enough free time to spend together, so maybe we need to do something else with it. So I'm always up for taking an idea and saying, okay, how can we do that?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Last week or a week before, I spoke at Yoga Journey in Boca, which is where I did my yoga teacher training, and I love that studio. That's my home
love that
studio.
studio. That's my studio.
I feel so good when I go, and I just, in the school year, probably because I needed it, put yoga back into place as a thing I must do on my weekend to reset for the week. And speaking there on Ayurveda and then getting to just enjoy community in person was so nice, because I'm used to speaking and lecturing online a lot more. And I prefer in person because we get to connect with the energies of each other.
Exactly.
So going back to what you said earlier, I just want to make sure on dosha and blood type, or dosha and astrology, do you have anything else that you want to share that you didn't get to cover yet?
Oh gosh. Yeah, but we don't have a few weeks. We only have a few minutes.
If you had like 5 more minutes, if there's anything else that's like, you didn't say the thing. I feel like that a lot after podcasting.
Okay. No, I'm going to sum it up right here. I'm going to say a couple of profound things that I don't know that you've heard me say before.
Sure.
I feel that these tools that I've been given that we're talking about today, I describe them as a soul blueprint. And my personal truth is that we each came into this life consciously. We were born at a particular moment in time, according to our astrology, to have certain experiences, fulfill on certain things, manage certain karmas, and all of that stuff. The more awareness we have about these things, as you know, the better choices we can make in navigating. And, what Dr. Frawley said about we have the tools to overcome the challenges we set up for ourselves, even. I love sharing this awareness with people. And the way I think about it and the way I'm languaging it these days, and again, I don't think you've heard this before, we each have a unique way to align with the life force, our immunity, our vitality. It's an energy. We all have the ability to align with that. And this conversation we're having today, Ayurveda to me is one of the most profound systems we have for that alignment. And then there are others, because if we're eating the foods that have our problem lectins, it's going to throw us off.
Right.
We didn't go into there for each blood type. There's a handful of foods that affect you mildly, like a bad blood type, a blood transfusion. That's what I mean by that. And I help people identify that. So that's the way I work with clients, is to find the foods that are good and bad for our blood types and then eat them in a way that the energetics are balancing for our dosha. That's the way I live. That's the way I work with people. So we have that. And then on the other side, Shivani, you and I are business women. I started my career on Wall Street. I was a vice president of a bank in New York City for many years. I have an MBA in finance. So we all bring different things to this field. And I believe that in the same way that we each have the ability to align with the life force, we all have the ability to align with universal flow in a way that, one of the 4 goals of yoga is wealth, to enjoy this world and contribute to it. So it's not a shameful thing, the wealth part. Our chart and all of these other things also help us identify how to align with universal flow in a way that's an expression of our being. So over the years, I think I've morphed into how I want to offer myself as a mentor to people, but especially women who are open to these things, about how to see themselves the way I see them, because I know how powerful these tools are. So you and I were discussing earlier, I don't have a full practice. I don't have a clinical practice at this point. I've never felt comfortable going on beyond my scope of training and all of that. But I do amazing consultations and readings for people with all of these things, and the tarot and some of my other intuitive tools. And it's mind-blowing. So most people don't know that this exists. It does. Yeah. I have a community where I teach about these things all the time. I have a podcast I'm launching, and I'm here on Zoom and potentially even in person, in some limited ways to share this. And I'm just thrilled to reconnect with you and share this message with more people than I yet have been able to do.
Absolutely. Ayurveda, as we've discussed, is profound. And what I love is all of us who carry this vibration of Ayurveda carry different rays of it. Mm-hmm. I'm very, are you inflamed? Can I fix you with turmeric? Like, I am very physical a lot of times in the way I'm approaching Ayurveda. And I'm going for the physical because I want that mental and emotional happiness and health and joy and vibration. I want those things. But we are also different in the practice of Ayurveda. And so I always love talking to you because you're coming at it from the complete opposite direction with completely different insights and understandings. And we're both right. And it's both. Yeah. Both yes. are valuable to the same person who's saying, I just need help. I want to feel good. I want to feel healthy. And I've tried this way. And now I'm ready to evolve into the next way and then the next way. And that's each of our individual health journeys.
I have to give you a little plug. You haven't heard this yet. This is very cool. I mentioned I'm just completing some significant dental work. Wow. And I found an amazing dentist who was holistic and, biologic and cosmetic, an all-woman office. Can't say enough about them. And I was very open with them because she was very open. And I said, I'm here and I respect your mastery, but I'm not a very easy patient. I don't just do anything. I know more than most people, and just know that we're going to do this my way. So I had some things happen where, they prescribed, they said, we're going to write you some prescriptions. I said, you can write whatever you want. I'm not filling them.
Totally.
But they sat me down to show, I said, tell me what they do so I'll be able to tell you what I'm doing instead.
Right.
So it was, this is for pain. Well, I have frequency for that.
Yeah.
This is for detox. Well, my good friend is, I'm using her product. This is for inflammation. I'm using the Fusionary Formulas thing because that is the best quality turmeric. So we went down the whole list, and I said, I'm going to my friend Tracy's tomorrow to pick it up because I know. So I turned to the doctor because she's like, who are you? And thank you for showing up here. But I said, I am so well connected. I have close friends that are the experts on everything. Like, I have cultivated this.
Yeah.
And I did exactly what I just told you. I had some really outstanding results. She's shocked.
Wow. That's awesome.
You were part of the conversation. I told her about you and your products, and part of the team that I'm putting together of the experts that I have lined up, because most women they have a challenge and they don't know where to start. And you and I do know where to start.
True. And we all get to bring this incredible wisdom forward. It's that moment. Ayurveda is so needed. It's so desperately needed by so many. And so I just feel so lucky that I studied it, that you studied it, that we all had access to this wisdom. And it's our job just to pay that forward. It's my job to teach Ayurveda so more people get to live the lifestyle.
It's a moral responsibility. And as we were sharing a little earlier, all of a sudden it's exploded. Yeah. Like, next week is World Ayurveda Day on my birthday.
So cool.
And this week there's a Florida Ayurveda thing. And I, speaking with you and that wonderful group in Australia that I spoke with last week, that I'm looking forward to connecting you. I think the Ayurveda of the women of the world need to come together.
I agree.
And I just got tingles when I said that.
The Wise Well Women Ayurveda Collective. I love it.
Math.
Let's make it happen.
Okay.
All right. Well, Susan, I just loved having you on the podcast today. I know we're about to hit an hour, which is way above podcast time zones. I go long, guys, because my guests are so incredible. I can't do 30-minute episodes. That doesn't work for me. I want the whole conversation to feel complete. So that's why my episodes are longer than most. Susan, will you share your website and how people can find you so that they can find your podcast, what you do? I know I'm going to do an astrological Ayurveda session because I need to hear it all again. Sometimes I need to hear everything every few years just to reabsorb it as my new self and then apply it to myself.
And Shivani, we're going to look at it from the perspective of your planetary type and your ascendant type that I think is not part of a typical reading. This is the Ayurvedic aspect of it. So that'll be way cool. But thank you for the question. So let me tell everybody, my website is divinarising.com, Divina. And it really is celebrating the rising of the divine feminine. And I have the descriptions of my readings there. And it's a little bit of a work in progress. And Facebook is a really good way to reach me because I believe I am the only Susan Joyce Proctor on the internet. Which it's easy to find me there. So we'll keep it easy and not share all the stuff. Those would be two really clear, direct ways to reach me.
Perfect.
And you know how to reach me. So
sure. If anyone needs to find Susan, you can DM me. I will find her for you. But thank you so much for coming onto the podcast today. Thank you for nerding out with me on Ayurveda and how we can apply it to our lives in so many different ways. I've always loved and admired you. So thank you for coming on today.
And you. This was so much fun.
Thank you, everyone, for listening to the Fusionary Health podcast today. You know where to find us. We're obviously on every single platform. If you want to find me, my website is drshivani.com. And I hope you all have a wonderful day, a wonderful week, and we'll see you next week for the next episode.
Thanks for joining me for this episode. Check out our sponsor, Fusionary Formulas. the potent turmeric supplement used by doctors around the US for patients with pain and inflammation. www.fusionaryformulas.com. I'm your host, Dr. Shivani Gupta. For more, visit shivanigupta.com. Subscribe to this podcast in Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Click the follow button or subscribe in any of the apps that you use. That's all I've got for you on the Fusionary Health podcast this week. You have the power to transform your health and achieve vibrant health starting today.